Alright guys, I am going to go over two things really quickly, and unfortunately I'm just using my camera because my screen capture software isn't working, so hopefully you're going to be able to see. This came up in class today, and I wanted to make sure you guys had the information also, and with the weather and the cancellation, I decided to go ahead and do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to make a generic box on the screen. And the one thing that people were looking for was a way to manipulate this shape even further, so beyond the direct select and beyond adding pen tool points. If you go to the Object menu and you slide down to Envelope Distort, the first two things here is what we're going to be dealing with. The first one is Make with Warp. Make sure you have your preview mode clicked on, and I'll just put this in the middle so you can see. So make sure the check mark is activated in preview. Under style, you have all sorts of options that you can go through, so shell lower, arc uppers, that sort. It just gives a nice variation to whatever it is that you are working on. You can also change the bends and the horizontal and verticals. I always recommend sort of paying attention to what it is right off the bat, because once you change this, so it's 50% 0 0, once you change that, it's going to remember it for everything. So if you want to do a reset, just make sure it's back to the 50% 0 0. So when you're happy, you can go ahead and click that. This also works for text. I'll move my keyboard so I can type text. Make it larger so you guys can see it. What's nice with this is you can do your effect with the distort, but you don't have to convert it to outlines or anything. So I just went back to the regular selection. I'll go back to Envelope Distort, Make with Warp, and there you can see it does it to the text also. So there can be use to this in your project, because I'm seeing that it is going to be coming in handy. I wasn't going to cover this till next week, but since the need arose, we went ahead and I wanted to show you that. We also will be exploring the Make with Warp later. That is actually similar to the gradient mesh, which we haven't dealt with, but what that ends up doing, and I'll just leave the gray on there. Go ahead, make it with the mesh. Make sure that preview is checked, and what ends up happening, this says it has 4 rows and 4 columns. 4 rows, or sorry, rows and then 4 columns. What this does is when you go to your direct select, and I'm going to deselect, reselect, each of these points become active, which if you've done an effect similar to, it's this better when it has actual colors on it. Let's see if it lets us change the colors. Nope, so it doesn't function like gradient mesh. This works really good whenever you distort images and you need the two to mesh. So what one student was doing was a window, and then they did a live tracing where looked like a woman was coming through the window. With this tool, you can actually get the perspectives or perspectives to actually align. So I'll undo some of these so you can see. So if we were trying to get it in 2-point perspective, you would just start taking this point by point and getting it to go in a line. Of course, you're going to have to use the handles to adjust it. So this one's a little trickier. I think the first one is going to be a little bit more applicable, so keep that in mind. Alright, one more thing I wanted to cover was transparencies and what you can do with transparencies. I'm going to change each of these to different colors so that they stand out a little bit more. In Photoshop, you're used to layer styles, and it is actually in Illustrator, but it's going to be under the transparency menu. So if your transparency palette isn't up, go to Window and click on the transparency so that you can activate it. I already have mine up. I usually work with it up. This is the one you can just change opacity if you so desire. So you are literally functioning with the transparency of the object. But under this click down bar where it says normal, this is the same as our layer styles in Photoshop. So we can darken, we can multiply. You won't see some of the effects if it's plain versus plain, difference, exclusion, hue, saturation, etc. You can get some really interesting effects. The lighten's sort of interesting. I'm going to put the default pattern that we have on there, and whenever we go to other modes, let's say hard light, soft light, you're going to get these really interesting interactions with it. Exclusion's usually pretty good, and this sort of texture and layer / transparency style has been coming in handy in some people's covers, so I wanted to make sure that you understood that one. You could put the effect on both of them. Right now it's just on this left circle. Bearing in mind, if you put it on both, this one's going to interact with this and the background. So in the early stages of getting used to it, I usually recommend change the transparency mode from normal on the top one, and then you can experiment from there. But it does give a really nice effect. Alright guys, enjoy the snow, and I will see you guys on Thursday.